as usual. So today's ICII session is scheduled to last 90 minutes, including Q&A. To ensure the highest quality of experience, everyone will be muted. Choose your preferred language using the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen on the rightmost side. Questions can be submitted via the Q&A feature. So be careful to submit your questions to the Q&A feature rather than the chats. And a selection will be made by me during at the end of the session. But feel free to submit your questions as you go along. This session is being recorded and will be made available online later. And finally, message the MIN executive team via chats for any technical issues that you face. So if you have been following the conference, or rather I would even say the whole year, I think you will agree with me that a running thread has really been the use of technology in every imaginable way possible. We have been talking about fintech now for a very long time, but the past few months and the experience of the pandemic has really shown us two things. So firstly, it has made us take a really hard look at whether going virtual in daily life, so be it in health, school, access to information, and insurance and financial services, of course, works for everyone equally. Secondly, it has also made digital infrastructure more essential and urgent than ever. So digitalization is really not something that should just be simply left to take its course. It's really something that we know now needs to be actively driven and to be put in place for the sake of development and the benefit of many. And equally in insurance, the question for a policymaker or for a regulator is really no longer should it be digital, but rather it's simply how we do it responsibly in a way that maximizes the reach and potential of insurance while minimizing its downsides. So most of us here know that the GIZ has been very active in this space for a very long time. And therefore, I'm very happy to invite Mr. Wolfgang Buecker to share his opening remarks. So Wolfgang is Head of Sector Programs, Financial Systems Development, and Global Initiative for Access to Insurance at the GIZ. He has over a decade of experience in financial inclusion and financial responsible for the sector program at the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, so BMZ as is known to most of us, since September 2015. Wolfgang, very pleased to have you here, and you now have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Huilin. Can you see me, my video?
Yes.
All right. I can't see myself, but that's fair enough and fine. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to a hopefully interesting and very dynamic session. I'm glad that we have a good chance today to really discuss the challenges and the great opportunities with regards to digitalization in market growth and for market growth, and also with a strong focus on regulatory requirements and challenges, and of course in the area of supervision. We all know, as Huilin already said, that digitalization is massively transforming the financial sector, creating all these enormous opportunities in and for financial inclusion. Digital financial services strongly support also the achievements of the SDG in various sectors, especially when we talk about the strong need for financial sector transformation, financial sector reform. This session will provide us with the opportunity to learn much more about the first experiences and some good research undertaken to analyze the opportunities as described, and also the first good experiences made in various projects when we talk about mobile, let's say, innovation in the area of financial inclusion, including, of course, insurance market development and inclusive insurance. And it's good that we have that focus today on the regulatory requirements. And as mentioned earlier, we will also discuss some good insights we gained in Morocco, in Ghana, and in Egypt. So I'm glad that we have the right persons, the right stakeholders on board today. And I'm really happy that GIZ was given the opportunity to host this session today. as insurance regulation has been an integral part of German Development Cooperation, and also in our work as GIZ to really increase financial inclusion in the area of insurance. And we have have gained a lot of experience in this sector. What we are always following is a strong holistic approach as GIZ, as German Development Cooperation as such. And we strongly promote that we, let's say, focus on the regulatory side as much as on private sector innovations and opportunities. As GIZ, there are 3 levels I'd like to mention. We focus very much on consumers, on their needs. We, of course, work directly with insurance companies, insurers in the countries, and more also with intermediaries. That's a core area we mostly focus on in projects we undertake. But also service providers, public or private, become more and more important as partners in programs we undertake on behalf of the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. And last but not least, thirdly, framework conditions matter so much, and that's what I really personally learned in the past years, coming more from the banking sector, that good strategies, sector strategies are so important in the emerging markets, in the developing countries to implement together with governments and the stakeholders. And as mentioned earlier, regulation and supervision is really a key success factor, I would frame it, to really gain some good progress in the market. So macro level matters a lot. When it comes to our achievements and activities we are aiming at on this so-called macro level, I'm particularly happy that GIZ hosts the Secretariat of the A2II, the Access to Insurance Initiative. I'm sure many of you already know well, which is really a unique global partnership and platform, which is very closely working with the standard setter, with the IIS in this sphere. And the A2II strongly supports insurance supervisors and regulators to exactly create these conditions for a good insurance market development and a good insurance market growth and innovation, also on the digital side. So thus to ensure that the world excluded households, the excluded and underserved, also small and medium enterprises, have access to insurance and to reduce their vulnerability against a variety of risks. That's our main scope, and this is what especially the A2II is strongly addressing in their work. So thank you, Hoylin, for facilitating this session today. Hoylin is also one of the authors of an A2II paper published in 2018 with a title entitled like Regulating Mobile Insurance Business via Mobile Phones. And it was exactly this paper that provided us with so much guidance also in our public-private partnerships we have with a variety of enterprises, and that really helped us and supported us to set it up in a good way with a strong focus on digital services. I'd like to raise especially the cooperation with Allianz and BIMA in a public-private partnership format, and we will learn quite a lot today about exactly these projects in the area of inclusive insurance and also in the context of regulatory requirements to enable exactly and to promote this market. We are about to come up with a white paper, something like a white paper that wants to analyze the status quo and also promotes exactly the discussion we are also going to have in a minute on potential and good solutions for regulation and for supervision by and allowing more and more mobile insurance models and products in the market. And I'm personally really believe that this mix of stakeholders, that exactly private sector plus regulation, supervision, standard setting body, the IAS, is really in this cooperation a big game changer already, and will be also, of course, in the future. Today, more than ever, digital technology is revolutionizing insurance provision and utilizing digital technology interfaces, platforms, processes, and so on that really support market development is key. And we really hope and also believe that it holds the potential to really reach scale, a big challenge, as we all know, to enhance efficiency, and last but not least, also to really bring the costs down of insurance products we want to sell to the target group. In many regions, insurance is a strong business driver already for increasing market penetration, and it's already demonstrating its commercial potential in so many good ways. But what is the key thing we should address today, and we will continue to discuss in the future? There are so many innovations coming up in the market, and often regulators, especially also supervisors, how should they deal with all these innovations that are in the pipeline, more and more coming up every week, new products, new market segments, etc. So it's such a big challenge for regulation and supervision in so many countries, and this is not just in the emerging market and developing countries world, to really keep path with all these enormous reforms we see. So that's the one side. On the other hand, there are so many innovative industry players, private sector players, who really want to develop, who want to get the approval in a, let's say, in a good time frame, in a good manner, to being really able to bring their products to the customers, SMEs, households, whatsoever. So this is really the big challenge from my point of view. And therefore, I'm really glad that today we have representatives from these, let's say, both sides, representatives from Morocco and from Ghana, supervisors who can provide us with their insights, with their experiences from their countries, from the public, from the regulation side. But also we have a good partner of GIZ and in working in a very innovative insurance project in Ghana on the health insurance side with BIMA. And also here, the private sector can just share their experiences with, let's say, the approval of innovative and new products that they want to place and sell in a country like Ghana. So I think that will also be very insightful for all of us. And often it's GIZ's role in our work to exactly bring these very relevant stakeholders together. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I see this really as a good good success factor, or critical success factor for the achievements we want to see in a variety of countries. In addition, and that's my final point, I would also use the opportunity to highlight the public-private partnership with the Alliance in the area of risk management, especially for SMEs, partly in industrial zones, and in direct cooperation with municipalities in Morocco and Ghana. We provide some good services now in COVID-19 times with ILO and Senfree, good partners in this special area. And also here we see how important it is to address the regulatory issues and to really elaborate together with the countries, of course, like always, elaborate good strategies that provide a good road, a good guideline for a good implementation afterwards. So we have good partners, good stakeholders together with us. Let's really challenge them in this session, Huilin. And I'm glad that we have these excellent stakeholders with us to have a fruitful and insightful debate in these very digital formats today. So in this sense, I wish us all a very inspiring discussion today, and also in the upcoming sessions. For example, tomorrow session 13 exactly on SME and insurance challenges. That's something I want to promote before I hand over again to Huilin. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang, firstly for the kind words about A2I, much appreciated. And also just really highlighting what an exciting space this is really, but also very challenging. And it's really something that cannot be done without the cooperation of all the different partners and stakeholders, such as exemplified by the panel today. So I feel for me, the takeaway from here is really what is it that makes digital insurance or mobile insurance doable or not doable in certain countries? Why has digital insurance taken off at scale in some places, but not yet in other places? And I think this is something that we really want to unpack today, but luckily for me, I'm not going to be the one to answer all these questions. We have a very distinguished panel here today with us. Firstly, Andrea Camargo. So Andrea is a Colombian lawyer specialized in insurance law and international economic law. She has decades of experience behind her, and she has advised supervisors, development organizations, the industry, and understands how to navigate the different mandates, roles, and motivations of the different stakeholders. Secondly, we have Mohamed Feriss, who leads the Insurance Products Monitoring Department within the Moroccan Insurance Supervisor, or ACAPS for short. He is a key member of the team driving the roadmap for inclusive insurance in Morocco. Thirdly, we have Mathilda Ström from BIMA. So BIMA is an insurance tech and digital health provider working in 9 markets across Africa and Asia. Mathilda leads BIMA in a capacity as Deputy CEO, and she's also on the board of the Micro Insurance Network. And last but definitely not least, Kofi Andoh. So Kofi is the Deputy Commissioner at the National Insurance Commission of Ghana. He has been active in a number of projects to develop the insurance market and improve access to insurance in the Ghanaian market, and not least being the implementation of risk-based supervisory regimes as well as the micro-insurance framework in Ghana. So just a quick reminder to everyone that if you have questions, please post them in a Q&A panel and we will take them at the end. But in the meantime, to get the ball rolling, Andrea will now share insights from the white paper that Wolfgang had talked about. And this paper aims to extract good practices on regulating mobile insurance, and in doing so, provide a tool for regulators who wish to self-assess the appropriateness of their own regulatory and supervisory frameworks. So over to you now, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Huilin. And good morning to everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm very glad to set the scene today for this session because I will be sharing with you some of the insights of the study commissioned by ICII that precisely aims to explore how supervisory authorities can unlock responsible mobile insurance in order to promote access to insurance. To start, I would like to offer you with some context so we all understand the relevance of the topic and why it's important to provide guidance to supervisors on this. I want to excuse myself by sharing the slides in this way, but I'm having some issues. So please let me know if you can see them. Well, maybe to start, I would like to offer you with some context so we all understand the relevance of the topic and why it's important to provide guidance to supervisors on this. So first, let me just provide you with some context. So I will stop to share my screen for a second because I think that I'm having some issues. Have you managed to look at my screen before, Huilin?
Yes, I managed to see your screen before.
Okay, sorry, it's showing me something different. Okay, so perfect. So in order to start, I would like to provide you with some definitions actually. So what are we talking about? So we are talking about mobile insurance. So in this study is defined as the distribution and administration of insurance through digital devices, primarily mobile phones, but not exclusively, and that's very important to highlight for today. Utilizing digital technology, interfaces, platforms, and processes to support insurance process across the value chain. As Willie mentioned, this topic is particularly relevant for inclusive insurance. And I think that nowadays, in the context of COVID-19, that's very obvious for all of us. And actually, the reason why it's so important is because it really helps us to overcome several obstacles that are very predominant for inclusive insurance. So we know that the widespread use of mobile insurance really helps us with that. For instance, these devices enable emerging consumers to conduct diverse financial transactions and administrative processes, which help us to overcome a geographical barrier that is always there. They reduce frictions all over the insurance value chain. They increase the speed, security, and transparency, which actually is very important to build trust, which is also very important in inclusive insurance. They help us to reduce high operating costs by maximizing economies of scale, and therefore unlocking business opportunities, new business models, and more tailored products, which is actually essential for emerging consumers. As mentioned before, since March, we have seen an extraordinary push to digitalization within the insurance value chain as a consequence of social distancing measures and lockdowns. And actually, this project changed a little bit the shape because of that. Well, Martina Widmeyer, Fitzer, and me started this project just before COVID-19, and the current pandemic has reshaped considerably the whole project. Well, why? Because COVID-19 amplified the urgency of mobile insurance, and this effectively keeps putting pressure on supervisory authorities to ensure that innovations are enabled within responsible frameworks. Supervisors are more than ever confronted to an important dilemma here, because these innovations effectively promote access to insurance, as we showed it before, but at the same time increases some risks, mainly related with conduct of business, and create new ones that can affect consumers and the stability of the market. Also, and this is very important, if we, let's say, put all the eggs of inclusive insurance in the basket of digitalization, some unintended consequences can take place, such as exclusion and discrimination. For instance, in contexts where unequal access of infrastructure is present, there are problems in terms of affordability of mobile devices and data plans. And in this respect, I would like to emphasize the gender issue here, because women are often disproportionately disadvantaged in respect of access to mobile devices. So effectively, these intended consequences could end up excluding them. So as you can see, the issue is not so straightforward, and supervisors require new approaches and tools to strike the right balance between promotion of inclusive insurance through enabling innovation and consumer protection and financial stability. Then, having presented this context, I would like to emphasize the objective of this project, which precisely is to provide supervisory authorities a tool that can help them to assess their regulatory and supervisory approaches to ensure that responsible innovation is enabled. This tool that we are putting together is supported by the guidance of the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, the IIS, and very importantly, it considers emerging good practices around the globe. This requires first, and let's say these are like the steps that are encouraged through this document, through this tool that is putting together. This requires first supervisory authorities to understand the level of development of mobile insurance markets. And for these, I would like to present you like two sides of the coin. Like the first one is very important that supervisory authorities understand what is the level of development of the insurance market. And for these, this information will be really helpful to understand the level of development of the inclusive insurance market. At the same time, because we're talking about digitalization, it's very important to know where we are in terms of like the development of the digitalization in the country. So here, this slide actually illustrates some of the examples that supervisory authorities can look at in order to locate their jurisdictions in respect of the stage of development of these markets. Now, looking at these will be really helpful to look at the enablers, but also the hindering factors that promote the development of mobile insurance in their countries. And for that, I would really like to encourage us to look at the supply, demand, and policy factors besides the regulatory issues. Of course, regulation is extremely important, but it's very, the message of today, I think, it's really to zoom out and look at all these elements that actually enable mobile insurance. So it's not only about regulation. Interestingly, for the specific cases of the study on Morocco and Egypt, we have found that the most important barriers are actually present on the supply and the demand side. So at the supply side, there are factors such as available digital information technology and infrastructure, including broad coverage, reliable power supply, and which are key. The issue is that they require high investments that in several countries are extremely needed. In countries like Kenya, Ghana, Tanzania, and India, the achievements in mobile insurance are a direct consequence of a strong digital infrastructures that ultimately became the backbone of digital payment systems. And I think that Kofi today is going to share some thoughts around it. For the case of Morocco and Egypt, digital infrastructures are still in development and providers are still putting together the elements to build a business case on it. In the demand side, it's important to look at the digital culture, the liquid customer engagement, and digital empowerment of customers. In Morocco, very importantly, we found that the obstacles that are present are related with the attachment of society with cash, and also the lack of acceptance of the dematerialization of the contract, despite like some efforts that we have seen in terms of regulation. Also, shopkeepers are still hesitant to accept digital payments due to fees, taxes, and administrative considerations. However, important progress has been made since March because of COVID-19, because it has pushed like the experience in respect of digital. At the policy level, it is important to assess the level of priority of the topic for the government. So for instance, in Ghana, in India, in Kenya, we have seen that the fact that governments look at financial inclusion and digitalization as key for them really pushed the agenda as well on mobile insurance. For the case of Morocco, actually, the timing is great because we have seen that the financial inclusion strategy is currently being implemented by different stakeholders from the public and private sector, and digitalization and microinsurance is actually the center of it. Egypt as well is a good example where actually the central bank is supporting fintech and has set up a regulatory sandbox to foster tech innovations. Now, the message here is like, once we have this broad picture in terms of enablers and hindering factors, we'll be really able to know where to work in order to move forward with the mobile insurance market. In that respect, we will focus now on regulation and supervision and the purpose of the tool. So once supervisory authorities have this big picture of opportunities and obstacles, the tool that we are developing will support supervisory authorities to explore the level of appropriateness of the regulatory and supervisory approaches for mobile insurance. So the idea actually is to provide like a self-assessment tool that will be very helpful for supervisory authorities to carry out this process by themselves. And also this tool will ultimately help providers that are intending to move forward with mobile insurance in the country in order to make like a kind of a due diligence of the country in respect of regulation. So the three tools that we are bringing into this tool is the three dimensions are like the first one is like to assess the level of digitalization of the insurance value chain allowed by the regulation. The second one relates with the possibility of using innovative providers and business models. And the third one is related with the level of efficiency and collaboration of the authorities that are involved. So to start with the first dimension, I would like you to bring your attention to this slide that actually shows.
J'aimerais donc attirer votre attention sur cette diapo et vous montrer que ces appareils numériques sont là pour soutenir ces processus.
It's very maybe important to highlight that the tool will have like a questionnaire that will help supervisory authorities to assess in which extent digital devices can support some or the steps of this insurance value chain, but very importantly in a responsible way, ensuring that risks like data privacy and unauthorized disclosures, mis-selling, and lack of effective recourse, amongst other risks, are well addressed. In the first dimension, as you can see in the slide, we're looking at different elements of the integration of digital devices in the insurance value chain. So first, we're going to look at how the regulatory framework, for instance, enables data gathering that will impact product design. For instance, in Egypt, we found that mobile apps are now enabling gathering information to understand the driver's behavior. The analysis will help us to understand if the regulation enables onboarding process of customers by digital devices. For instance, by facilitating the identity verification processes in a context of informality and lack of documentation. In that respect, I would like to emphasize that Morocco has recently, has adopted important steps to enable know your client requirements, which are supported with digital devices. And also Morocco has made a lot of progress in terms of the biometric ID in the country. In Egypt, there are as well simplified know your client requirements that were issued by the central bank and that also facilitate mobile-based premium payments. In this dimension, we also look at how the regulation enables the disclosure of information by mobile phones, or how it enables electronic signatures and electronic contracts, which we know that is an important topic that effectively supports the dematerialization of the contract. In this particular case, Egypt and Morocco have made progress, and this ultimately has been very pushed during the COVID-19 crisis. So it's again another proof on how this crisis ultimately has catalyzed a lot of development on the side of the provision of these products, but also in terms of enabling these approaches. This dimension will help us also to understand if the regulation enables electronic payments, and also if, for instance, it's possible to use e-money to collect premiums and to provide payouts. In the case of Egypt and Morocco, these approaches are actually enabled. Now, once we have looked this level of digitalization of the insurance value chain through this questionnaire, and also with the help of good practices, gathering examples from around the globe, and also the guidelines from the IIS, the idea is that supervisors will look at a second dimension. The second dimension, as I mentioned, is the use of innovative providers and business models. So this dimension looks at three questions. The first one is trying to understand if these key stakeholders that generally participate in mobile insurance are actually allowed by the regulation. So that means that we're going to look at how, for instance, MNOs, mobile money providers, technical service providers, online platforms, fintech and big tech firms, retail agents supporting processes are enabled to participate in this framework. These will lead us to some specific questions, for instance, relating with the type of mechanism that the regulation allows them to participate. For instance, are they allowed to participate as alternative distribution channels, as brokers, as agents? What type of licensing do they require? What is the process to obtain this license? How easy, how difficult it is? Which authorities are involved in this process? So this is actually the focus of the first question. Then the second question is more focused in terms of the business model. So in the first one, we look at who is offering, who is participating and how. And the second one is more about what are these models that are now present in the market and how the regulation actually enables these kind of models. So for this particular case, what we're very interested in, the tool really aims to help us to gather information about the type of partnerships that are presented and the structures. Then a key question that is cross-cutting all over the tool is that how regulation ensures that consumers are effectively protected when all these new channels, new participants, stakeholders participate, and also when all these models are present. So this includes elements as looking at clear disclosures, cost metrics, commissions, amongst others. So now, after having looked at the level of digitalization of the insurance value chain, and after having looked at the the element of distribution and business models, it's very important to look at the efficiency and collaboration of authorities that are involved. So this particular element is very important because you have seen with the previous presentation, and you will see it in the conversation later, that ultimately there are a lot of new stakeholders. And this active involvement of them implies the involvement of other regulatory authorities and other supervisory authorities that directly or indirectly are involved in enabling these models. So here, ultimately, the objective is to ensure that appropriate coordination between all of them is present. And this is very important because this will facilitate, for instance, product approval, regulatory improvement, in the case that there is effectively something that needs to be tweaked or improved or modified. Very important messages like this will depend effectively depending on the stage of the market development. And therefore it's a key element, a key dimension that sometimes gets a little bit forgotten. So to conclude, I would like to finalize by saying that we hope that this tool that actually will be present, we will present for consultations with the stakeholders at the beginning of 2021, and that will be finalized by March 2021. So we hope that this tool will facilitate these innovation processes to be carried responsibly, that's very important, and guide supervisors to precisely strike this right balance between innovation and consumer protection in order to unlock access to insurance, which is precisely the topic of this conference. Well, thank you, and Huilin, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much for that, Andrea. That's really interesting. And what I really like about it is how you sort of show that, you know, there are these factors and enablers that are sort of beyond sort of the regulatory purview and control. And you also have these sort of factors that are within regulatory control. And this really sort of helps to structure the issue when we are talking about, you know, what are the factors that support or support digital insurance. So now it's really time to hear what the speakers in the room have to say. And I'm going to start by first turning to Mathilda. So Mathilda, most of us in this room are not strangers to BIMA, and it'd be really great to hear from you. So what are some of the digitalization related trends you are seeing on the consumer and the product side, especially in context of COVID, and also to just sort of hear your comments as a seasoned practitioner in digital insurance and inclusive insurance, what your view on this sort of conceptual framework is, and, you know, are there any examples you could share that, you know, that sort of speak to the key success factors that you've experienced in the different countries in sort of expanding BIMA's business?
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me here, Quaylin. I'll talk about the 4 digitization trends that I've been seeing this year, and many of them accelerated by COVID. The first one that we've seen is the increased usage and comfort with mobile money channels and other new payment channels, especially when buying products on a subscription basis. So one of the things that we found is subscription-based products for insurance and health services are a much more sort of efficient way of selling our products. An example that I saw recently was that a company called Grab, which is a ride-hailing company in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, that also has a mobile wallet, said they had 7 million users making their first digital transaction with Grab Asia during COVID. So a lot of people starting to get on that platform, encouraged by the COVID crisis. The second trend is increased usage and comfort with smartphones and digital and social media channels. So the likes of WhatsApp, in particular in Africa, Facebook Messenger in some parts of Asia, and Viber, and those sorts of platforms. And the implications of this come back to Andrea's kind of customer journey cycle around engagement with products, how people engage with companies for claims, for example, you know, wanting to send pictures and videos over social media, or for health services. And while we found that during COVID, you know, teledoctor utilization doubled and has stayed very high, claims themselves were lagging during the periods of lockdown because there's still a requirement for physical documentation. And I think that's going to very quickly be the expectation that goes away. The third trend is the implications for marketing and promotion. So we had 300 field agents in Ghana during the COVID crisis, and most of those were therefore completely out of work during COVID because they couldn't sort of roam the streets. And we had to go into digital marketing in a much bigger way. And so things like, you know, general digital marketing, but also influencer marketing is, you know, with companies like AIfluence, a very interesting company doing work in this space, is starting to show us new ways for how we can use influencers to generate trust in our community about insurance and education about health services. And then the fourth trend is seeing new channels selling insurance. So for example, bringing up Grab again, this ride-hailing kind of platform that's become a platform for all types of services, has sold 28 million insurance policies this year, I believe, to over 1 million customers. And we don't work with Grab, so it's not a promotion you know, of us here. I think it's interesting to see all the different players that are coming into this space that look and feel very different from our classic insurance distribution models. So those are the digitization trends. And you mentioned also, you know, how do I feel about Andrea's framework? So I think it really succinctly captures the regulatory conditions that are conducive to this kind of innovation that we're seeing. They're very simple words, but I think what's the tricky part is putting it into practice. And I'll go into a couple of examples of where I've seen things working and where I've seen regulators also struggling together with us to make things work. But just before I do that, I think really a key factor for BIMA, regulation becomes a hygiene factor when actually the main success factor is a conducive payments landscape. So how is the evolution of people and comfort of people using payment channels? That's really what makes or breaks our business model. And distribution capabilities is the second one. So really, if you know, from a regulatory perspective, I would prioritize distribution and payments as things to solve to enable this market. But so going into some examples of things, I think what is key that Andrea mentioned is we now see, you know, us and other intermediaries playing in multiple different spaces. So we specifically operate under several jurisdictions now, insurance clearly, telecoms as well, finance with respect to payments, and the health sector. And this can get quite complicated. And what I think our experience in Ghana is, for example, together with Kofi, who joins me on this call, is that the NIC is very empowered in Ghana. They play a key role in facilitating the industry and supporting across these cross-governmental discussions that we have to have, whether it's with the Bank of Ghana or other regulatory bodies. They really play a key role in that. And all industry players are close to NIC and are consulted for key decisions, which is a really great way to have a relationship with a regulator where there's real openness to new players and new approaches that drive innovation, which brings us security in the investment in the country for BIMA and for other players in our space. Whereas, you know, a counterexample to that is when I visited Egypt first in 2014, back in the early days of BIMA, and we met with the insurance regulator at the time. They told us to first get approvals from the telecoms regulator. And the telecoms regulator told us to first get approvals from the insurance regulator. And so it left us in a bit of an evil cycle of not being able to sort of find anyone to take ownership of our services. But more recently, I'm pleased to sort of see that the FRA has been much more in the driver's seat now of trying to take insurance innovation forward. Even as recently as last week in Tanzania, we were brought together around a table between the insurance regulator, the telecoms regulator, and us and our partners to discuss a topic which crossed all the different kind of industries to discuss who owns what decision. A couple of other things that kind of came up as examples. So I once met a regulator that said our mobile and internet regulations are from the 80s. So think back to the mobile phone and computer industries that existed back in the 80s. And that's what you'll get in terms of a digital legislation, i.e. things like digital signatures are never going to even have been thought of back then, so they're not allowed. You know, we also had regulations stipulating in other markets the equivalent of a college qualification for an agent to be able to sell insurance, which, as you know, for very basic insurances, makes it very difficult for us to do business on a large scale. So basic regulations like for things like digital signatures, ability to take payments, really key, and relationships with regulators, like the Cambodia regulator came and had a 3-day workshop with us in Stockholm to really get to understand what we're trying to do. And those kind of relationships really make for a successful partnership in the country.
Thanks very much for that, Mathilda. That's really interesting because it really sounds like the dynamics between regulators and the industry sort of needs to change as we move forward. It's not so much about one party approving the other, but kind of both parties putting their heads together to solve a common problem that's really difficult for both the industry and regulators to work their way through. So it's a very good time now to sort of turn to the supervisors in the room. So maybe Mathilda, you said a couple of really nice words about Ghana. So Kofi, now turning to you. So Ghana has a thriving market of mobile insurance, as everyone by now knows, where 3 mobile network operators have really played a pivotal role in widening access to insurance for the public at large. And NIC Ghana is really known as a regulator who has grounded your approach in sort of understanding the industry perspective and building that into the way you shape your regulations. So could you, so Kofi, maybe could you share with us a bit of context as to NIC's sort of overall mindsets and philosophy as to how you sort of want to encourage digitalization in the insurance sector, and also sort of coming back to these sort of 3 dimensions that we see in the screen here, can you sort of pick out examples of steps that NIC Ghana took to actively promote digitalization in your sector?
Thank you, Louis. So the NIC's approach has been to embrace innovation. We had problems to solve. We wanted to improve access to insurance to the population, and we identified barriers. So we're looking forward to ways of improving access. And so the NIC is open to innovation, actually encourages innovation and looks into how the issues can be resolved. So even though at the time that we, the issue of mobile insurance came up, I think that's way back 2010, we really didn't have any specific legislation dealing with mobile insurance, but we looked at it and said, hey, this can help us to scale over some of the barriers that we have. So we asked basic questions. So what exactly do they want to do? And how do they want to do it? Who are involved? And what roles are they going to play? What could go wrong with what they want to do? And what can we do to safeguard it if something goes wrong? So was an open mindset, very transparent with the players to sit down and discuss what they want to do. And of course, being very mindful that those could come with risk as well. We looked into those issues and just made sure that we had measures in place, risks of protection for the consumer, risk of adversely affecting the stability of the market. So we looked at those issues and we say, what? Once we have ways of dealing with these, we could actually move on. So the NIC's mindset, philosophy really has been open to actually encourage innovation. We do know that, and Ghana has a very high mobile phone penetration, over 90%. It must be close to 100 by now. And so we knew that if we were able to help the players to do this mobile insurance, then it was going to help us to achieve the scale that we needed. And so that's the open mindset philosophy. In terms of the framework, yes, I think I can relate to the framework and the various issues that it talks about. So the first issue about the digitization of the value chain. Indeed, over here in Ghana, there are no restrictions to which part of the value chain can be digitalized and which part cannot be digitalized. So as I indicated earlier on, one of the basic questions we would ask, what do you want to do and how do you want to do it? We don't have what you can do and what you cannot do. And then we think through what you want to do and try to identify. So right from onboarding to distribution, to premium collection, to claims management. I mean, once you have figured out a way that you can do that digitally, we would go into it and see how you are doing it and what the risks are. And once we are satisfied that there are adequate measures in place to mitigate the risks, we let go. So for premium collection, for example, there have been the mobile money promotion has been good, and the government has implemented the interoperability, which means that if you are on one mobile network, you can make payment to networks, other networks, without any difficulties or additional charges. And with the same with claims management, once you have figured out exactly how you want to go about your claims administration, what kind of document you want, how it can be transmitted electronically, and you have controls around it. We don't. So basically, the NIC doesn't have any restrictions around the value chain, specifically as to what can be digitalized and what cannot. We just will have to be sure that you've thought through what you want to do. Now, when it comes to the business model, the issue that I asked, the questions I asked earlier on also come in here. Again, there are no restrictions as to who can participate in the sector and who cannot. Again, the questions come in. Who and who are involved in what you want to do? And what role does each perform? So the issue of whether or not to license a player depends on what that player will be doing in the collaboration. What will they be doing? Is it a supervised activity? And do we need controls around it? So that is what we use, but there are all sorts of entities which are involved in the business models that we have here. Some 2, 3, some insurtechs, technical service providers, MNOs, many of them. And depending, we give the freedom to the players to structure the model. And we just make sure that the risks have been covered. And so they have the freedom to do that. We just make sure that there is adequate risk management for the consumers. So once the partners come together and they want to collaborate, we would like them to have a formal agreement so that we are not operating in a vacuum. We would like them to have some contingency plans just in case they decide to discontinue or they have some disagreement. How are they going to resolve it? How much notice they have to give us. So we don't have restrictions out to the players, but they must play by the rules so that we will just not sleep overnight and leave all the customers without protection the next day. And talking about collaboration with authorities, yes, because there are various players involved, there are a number of regulatory authorities also involved. And the NIC has collaborated with the central bank, which regulates the banking and the payment systems, collaborated with the National Communications Authority, which regulates the mobile network operators. And there were very fruitful discussions from the beginning to make all this happen. The main objective there was to avoid gaps or duplications. And so if one regulator is already doing something, we could just rely on what it has done to satisfy the regulatory requirement and not necessarily duplicate that and thereby increase cost or make it difficult for them. And then to also avoid gaps, is there something that nobody is doing? So how can we come in and identify that and say that, okay, you are best positioned to do this, so do it. And then the collaboration also helps a lot in solving problems. For example, we had problems with using airtime to pay premiums, and we had to collaborate with the payment systems regulator, which is the central bank, and at some point had to bring in the Ministry of Finance to do this. So yes, collaboration with various authorities is very necessary, and the NIC does that quite well too. The outcome of this, well, you have spoken about it. So as at now, we have over 65% of our inclusive insurance sold through the mobile phone, and it is still growing thanks to entities like BIMA and Micro Insure and the rest, and they continue to innovate and find better ways of doing it even more. And we are looking forward to even growing this. The last time we checked, we were about 30% coverage of the population. We are looking forward to increasing this to about 40 or 50% in the next 5 years. And there are a number of things that we are looking forward to. So briefly, in order not to take more time than allocated to me, I'll stop here. So if you have any more questions later, I'll take them.
Thank you very much for that, Kofi. That's really interesting and definitely a lot to be learned by regulators around the world from Ghana's journey. And so we spoke a little bit earlier about how the landscape of consumer behavior and how influencers are being increasingly used in marketing. So basically this kind of whole landscape of how consumers interact with digital tools and insurance is also changing as well. And on this note, I would like to turn to Mohamed, so from ACAPS. And ACAPS is on a journey towards digitalizing the insurance sector, and technology is being increasingly used to distribute insurance products. But it is noted that mobile insurance is still a nascent market in Morocco. So Mohamed, could you maybe share a bit of background on this? So what is the current landscape in the Moroccan insurance sector, and why do you see a need to adopt a regulatory framework to promote digitalization, and also sort of using these 3 dimensions that we have on the screen here as a guide?
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you for organizing this session and also for giving me the opportunity to share the Moroccan experience in this area. I'd like to start with a brief presentation of the insurance sector in Morocco. It's made up of 23 insurance companies. The sector is in continuous growth with an average growth of 9.5%. $5 billion worth of market, and Morocco is the insurance sector in Morocco is the 2nd in Africa. Regarding the distribution, we have 4 main players. The classical insurance intermediaries who have 2,500 sales points. We have 11 banks. Also, we have 6,000 agencies, and the Moroccan law allows also to present or submit some insurance operations. These figures are quite important. We find, however, some constraints. What I mean is that the physical network does not allow to cover the whole of the national territory. And the intermediaries, insurance intermediaries, work in the sector of the automobile and also the obligatory. And they use the digital in the banking operations, but don't necessarily use the digital tools in order to sell their insurance.
It jeopardizes the access to the insurance products at the national level. I believe that Morocco, in parallel, notices an important evolution as far as the internet, people with internet, with mobile phones. More than 70% of Moroccans are equipped they have a smartphone, basically, in a nutshell. And also, we've just launched a project, electronic national identity card, that's going to facilitate certain tasks for the different trades. It will be easy to identify the insured people, and it will be easier for the insurance companies. Also, as far as the legal framework is concerned, we have a law that deals with distance contracts. It's a law having to do with the protection of consumers. A certain number of prerequisites are defined, the idea being to protect the consumers, generally speaking, amongst which, a lot of people. There's also a law from 2007 with two very important elements. To start with, the equivalence between the paper document and the electronic document, a recognition of the electronic document then, and also we have the electronic signature. That's to say that the electronic signature can be used to sign the contract, the insurance contract. And in that sense, the operators can rely on such signatures, electronic signatures, if need be. You have all these legal aspects, but also we have the authority that controls insurance companies. We have a text since March 2012, the objective being to present in a precise way the legal requirements to the operators so that the operators, it will facilitate the life of everyone, and it's about being clear with a lot of explanations, explaining the legal requirements. Also, we have a pre-control. That's to say that the operators wishing to launch an electronic system to sell insurances, they need to present this to the authority, the objective being to help them, flank them, support them, so that the electronic system is approved before it is actually launched officially. In that sense, we'll avoid a legal vacuum and will better protect the insured, bearing in mind that this enables to improve things. That's to say you can have a client space on the site, enabling to read through the contractual documents. And that's important because it's not always a fact that the insurance company hands over physically the contract in question. And it's about improving the access to the insurance products, but it's also about protecting the insured. In that sense, we have carried out a certain number of actions based on the market, and there are partnerships, consultation with the stakeholders, and you have intermediate people, you have the banks, etc. Also, we've launched a study regarding the distribution of these digital tools. The object is to assess the digital world. We focus on the development of mobile insurance and also the different developments in the sector. And it's about bearing in mind the fact that there are a lot of digital solutions. As a controller online sites, we've dealt with a certain number of projects that were launched, and the operators often limit themselves to the payment of the premium online. So the premium is paid online remotely. But as to the actors, they need to communicate the contract. You need a paper version. It's not a constraint as such, but it's a technical constraint. That's to say that the operators can set up a simplified signature enabling to sign remotely the insurance contract. And also in the car, as far as car insurances are concerned, there's a document that is used to control the satisfaction level, and a study was launched in 2019 to dematerialize the whole paperwork in the whole process. And also, Madame Andrea, you mentioned the national strategy financial inclusion. Here, there are different topics. The inclusive insurance question, and also for us, it can only be done without, it can't be done without opening different channels to different stakeholders. So it's about having an authorization for the payment entities that, and when you take the digital world, it's one of the distribution channels, and the authority, controlling authority in Morocco is seriously considering this possibility. The national strategy enabled also vis-à-vis the third dimension, enabled in fact to create a space, an area to exchange so that the different authorities could exchange, because we do not have a clear partnership framework. We've lost the gentleman, I believe. Yeah. The idea is to, we've lost the gentleman again, sorry. No, we can't hear him, unfortunately, anymore.
Let's just give it a second.
Quelques instants.
Apparemment, il y avait un problème de déconnexion.
So there was a connection problem, says the speaker. Can I carry on, ask the speaker?
Yes.
What I was saying vis-à-vis the third dimension concerning cooperation with the other authorities, the national strategy, financial inclusion, is going to enable us to have channels, partnership channels, exchange channels with the different authorities, amongst which the regulation authority, personal data protection authority body, and globally the insurance sector uses the digital solutions. It's important to communicate with the public, and it's also going to enable to reinforce the trust, digital trust. Digital trust. It was indeed an obstacle in the past, and you have different technical priorities, legal priorities. In Morocco, quite a few people are a bit concerned and afraid of this these digital solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mohamed. I think you've really shown how ACAPS is really sort of going into the details, to really sort of address every step of the customer journey to enable sort of a seamless, sort of digitally enabled sort of experience with insurance from end to end. And you also sort of demonstrated the importance of uniting this under really a strong overarching financial inclusion strategy that involves the different stakeholders. And I mean, to me, this is it really echoes all the things that Mathilda and Kofi has been saying as well about the importance of coordination, about the importance of having an open dynamic and sort of a willingness to learn on both sides between the industry and regulator as well. So now I would just sort of like to take a step sort of towards the future. I think there are lots of different lessons that we've gotten from this session so far. So I really have sort of two main questions to all the panelists here. So the first thing is, can you just share maybe tell us maybe one thing about what is your sort of most immediate future priority area? And then the second thing that I would like you to share with the audience is also, what would you say are your top 3 recommendations for supervisors moving forward? So for supervisors who want to develop the mobile and digital insurance sectors in their jurisdictions as well. Maybe let's start with Kofi, and then Mathilda, and then we will have Mohamed. Kofi, I believe you might be on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. What the next step we are looking at is to further collaboration with some other authorities, like the tax authority, because, using the mobile phone and the mobile credit pay premium sometimes has tax implications. which sometimes become difficult to resolve. So we are looking to engaging the tax authorities to help us resolve those issues. But we are also trying now to reach out to the micro and small businesses to now extend digital insurance services to them to help them resolve some of the risks that they face. And that is the main steps that the main next steps that we are hoping to take in our digital or mobile insurance journey. In terms of recommendations that I have, the first one is that to do well with innovation and digitization, you need to have principle-based regulations. Okay, and these are regulations that indicate what has to be achieved and why it has to be achieved, without necessarily being strict about how it must be done. Because once it lays down how it must be done in ink, it makes it difficult for somebody to do it another way, even though that might be a better way of doing it. So getting principle-based regulation helps you to embrace innovation and helps to find good ways, good alternative ways of handling issues. The other thing is about building capacity. As regulators need to build capacity, we need to understand this digitization going on in the insurance space. Digitization is changing the customer protection or the policyholder protection rules, because how the insurance onboarding, how the claims is done, how the complaints are handled is changing. And therefore, as regulators, we need to understand how the risks are changing and what we need to do to mitigate these risks. And so it is very important to understand, to build capacity in these areas to be able to mitigate the risk. And then the last one will be, we need to now review the customer protection regulations, because as I said, as the mode of operation, as the value chain is getting digitized, the risks are changing. And so the regulations we have there, thinking that they are intended to protect the consumer. Are they really protecting the consumer as at now? Where are the market conduct risks as of now? Are they the same as they used to be when we had manual insurance? So my top regulations, get principle-based regulations, build capacity, and review regulations to suit the digitized environment. Thank you, Chloe.
Great, I'll go next. Thanks for that, Kofi. I think it's really interesting to hear you and Mohamed speak. Things that BIMA is working on, we have a lot of things that are going on. I would mention three that we coincidentally are working together with GIZ and Allianz in a public-private partnership on. One of them is personalized digital journeys. So through WhatsApp or IVR or SMS, delivering things like health content and onboarding journeys. The second is technology, developing technology for our agents in the field to use to make them more efficient and self-serving. And the third is we're piloting physical kiosks, which we want to be the center for customer experience in more remote areas in Ghana, actually. And as we expand our physical agent force to more remote cities, we really need a face of the company, and a physical location is actually still important. And one of the things we're going to do there is sort of showcase our digital solutions and provide customer service. My recommendations to other regulators, quite high level things, but if you can get them done, I think would really help the industry players. I have four things. The first is to create clarity on which government entity ultimately owns the decisions in this space, and crucially, make sure they're empowered to make decisions. The second is to create clear processes and fast approvals on basic things like licenses, products, and partnerships. The third is to be consultative, open, and transparent with the industry stakeholders, and they will then help you on your way by giving you all the knowledge and understanding for what they would like to do. And the fourth is a hygiene factor, really, but make sure that any outdated laws and regulations that might prohibit digitization in terms of distribution and payments is updated pronto, and that will help you to not face basic constraints. So those are my four recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathilda. Yeah, Mohamed, please go ahead.
Merci, merci. Oui. Donc, je
Thank
pense
you. Indeed. To start with, we need to carry on with our work. We need to revisit regulatory frameworks, etc. We need to open, give possibilities to new distribution channels, digital channel. We have an amendment in that sense that deals with distribution. There's a system having to do with digitalization. We are going to carry on in Morocco. There's also an amendment project having to do with the digital world. It's about looking for new electronic signature possibilities, and also vis-a-vis supervision. At the beginning of this, so we've adopted the supervision possibilities. An example for the people in charge of departments, we've modified the way you control insurance contracts. Since September 2019, products can be controlled, and the assessment can be done after the contract has been signed. And this can mean that the contract, if need be, can be modified. If an insurance company does not abide by the regulatory framework, then a control, an assessment can be done afterwards, after signing the contract. This should enable to inject more flexibility, innovation for insurance companies, generally speaking. Also, vis-a-vis this necessity to strike a balance between our mission as supervisors. We're also there to protect the insured, and also it's about developing our activities, improving access to our services, and of course, there's the question of the costs for the national population, bearing in mind that the digital approach enables to lower the costs for the users and for the operators. Also, you have the partnership framework for the authorities concerned. The idea is to create synergy between the different monitoring authorities. Madame Mathilda talked about this. The idea is to make sure that projects can be presented to the CFDP, for instance, different authorities. It is necessary to set up a framework to cooperate, enabling, to create synergies, to facilitate the task for the operators, and to exchange expertise between the different operators. And of course, it's going to enable to look for solutions in a transversal way, bearing in mind the technical constraints and the regulatory framework constraints. This is going to enable us to boost digitalization. Moreover, we have an agency dealing with the development of the digital world. Generally speaking, they deal with the development of the digital world at a national level. And what's also important, finally, we also cooperate with a body that deals with communication. It's important to foresee a certain number of programs, awareness programs vis-a-vis the digital world. So concerning insurance products, as was said, we noticed that there are problems at the level of offer, and it's due to competition, and it's also, it has something to do with the phone operators. The Moroccan population is still interested in paper, basically. And of course, you have international partnerships with other supervisors. why not also use what's been done in other countries and see how we can evolve in our legal framework? And it's about perhaps adopting a new vision, innovative vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mohamed. So I would really, I'm really happy now to open the floor for questions and answers. And I'm going to first apologize in advance if we can't get through everything in time. But I would like to start with a question that I would say is really a very classic question that speaks to the heart of this kind of whole new mobile insurance landscape. So the question here is, would it be possible to hold mobile network operators to accounts, to hold them liable if there are disputes between them and consumers? So for example, where there is compensation actually paid by the insurer, but withheld by the mobile network operators who have to take care of the payments through the electronic wallet. So this is a question for Kofi. So maybe let's start with you there.
Okay, so I did indicate that in our case, once we don't define which players want to collaborate to do mobile insurance, but when the parties come together, they must give us an agreement between themselves as to who is doing what. The idea here is to know clearly who does what and who bears responsibility for which one. And this is a signed agreement. I'm sure it's enforceable. So if it is the responsibility of the MNO to make payment, they have a legal obligation to do so, and they have to do so under the circumstance. I must say though that for most of the schemes that we have, there's something we call the technical service provider, and it is this technical service provider which is actually the face of the mobile insurance scheme, and it is this provider that pays the claims. We have not had any dispute where an MNO has refused to pay something. But the bottom line is that there is an agreement, there is a contingency plan. So there's first a dispute resolution agreement they have to give us, that if there's a dispute, they will follow that to get a resolution. And if, just in case they fail to resolve, they must give us a contingency plan as to how they are going to either part ways or deal with the issue that they have. So that is what the arrangement we have in place to mitigate such risks.
Thank you very much. That's really informative. And also another second question that I feel also is very relevant to this mobile insurance landscape. So maybe this question I would sort of direct it at Mathilda, because you would be the one who have also sort of like navigated between different authorities. So the question here is, are there any standards framing what are the data points allowed to be collected and analyzed, or are there any limits to data collection?
I saw that question and I'm not sure if I understand it fully. I think when you ask about data collection, are you asking about what can we gather about the customer from the customer himself or herself? If it's sort of their name and their age and details about themselves, I'm not aware of any restrictions that we have about asking them about that. If it's around what can we collect without the customer's knowledge, you know, for example, their behavior on Facebook and social media, I think typically there's very standard, now more standardized regulations around data protection and what individual personally identifiable data that you can collect from third-party channels or give away, let's say, to third-party channels. And that's anything that essentially can identify an individual and identify who they are. And typically, yes, the likes of Facebook have removed that, you know, the capability for you to identify individuals, but you can get, you know, very aggregated data that you can analyze on individuals' demographics without finding out about an individual. And that's still allowed. It was that I wasn't sure if I answered the question exactly through that, but hopefully the person who asked the question feels that answers it honestly.
Yes, sure. Feel free to clarify in the chat if we're not answering your question. So the next question I have is directed at Mohamed. So this is a question about anti-money laundering considerations. So do you have any special concerns about anti-money laundering, AML, CFT with regards to mobile insurance?
Oui, Oui, bien évidemment. Donc, nous avons une structure
Of
dédiée.
course, indeed. We make sure we check all that has to do with money laundering. We have a service that deals with laundering. Indeed, controls are done on a regular basis. We're talking about physical operations and operations at the level of the online sites. We have a circular, and it states that the operators need to fight money laundering and financing terrorism. And also, there's a question of financial inclusion. Also, we are thinking about a way to do what it takes to facilitate things with micro-insurance, for instance. The objective being to be able to monitor properly. We're talking about small contracts, small amounts, micro-insurances. There, it is not necessary to request as many requirements. Now, concerning the question having to do with claims, we've set up a digital platform for the citizens so that they can forward complaints to the CAPS. It concerns the insurance world, and it has to do with remote insurance. And we have a mediator at the level of the sector dealing with the management of these requests before forwarding them to the courts if need be. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mohamed. So my next question now is sort of kind of maybe sort of taking a step back and looking at the role of the regulator. So we have a question here saying, within the evaluation of sort of these new innovative channels and models, what is your take on the role of the regulator, or should it be another authority perhaps, in terms of increasing financial literacy? So for this question, let's have all three of you give your perspective on this, and maybe let's start with Kofi, and then we have Mohamed, and finally Mathilda.
Well, I think it is extremely important for the regulator to be involved in consumer education. It is really important that they do so, and it must be planned and targeted so that we can achieve the best out of it. But the thing with education is that if you are really doing it well, it is very expensive. And so really to be good for all the players in the industry, the regulator, the players, and probably the government to come together to collaborate to do this and do it comprehensively and effectively, selecting appropriate channels, targeting, segmenting the population, and developing content that will appeal to each segment and appropriately transmit this information to them. So yes, it is important for the regulator. I think the regulator must take a leading role, but because it is expensive and because they need the support of other stakeholders, it is really best if all the stakeholders can collaborate and deliver a comprehensive and well thought through financial literacy. Thank you.
Wow. So the question was the role of regulators in financial literacy. What is your view on that?
En moi?
Yes.
Ouais. Donc, il y a plusieurs rôles en fait, plusieurs rôles. Donc, le premier rôle, c'est le rôle de... Nous avons un rôle de développement de l'activité assurantielle. Et donc, il faut éviter, nous avons un rôle en fait dans le sens que nous devrions éviter les contraintes, que ce soit réglementaires ou...
We should avoid constraint, whether they are regulatory or technical, that are just an obstacle. Whether the channel is physical or digital, here we are not talking about only a supervisory role, but we are a stakeholder in the digital insurance at national level. Second thing, it has to do with the protection of the insurees. You have to protect the customers, and there are three axes to this. First of all, controlling the insurance product. We also have the control of the commercial practices, sales practices, and we have a department that's in charge of managing the claims and the proportion of insurance. And here, it's very important because we need to improve financial culture or financial education, so to speak, of citizens, and also at the same time improve the trust. So this is going to allow to improve the insurance activity at national level, but also access to insurance and trust, because some customers have constraints. We're talking about cultural or even ideological constraints. This is maybe the case of the majority of emerging countries. So I think that our role basically is crucial, and I'm insisting on the need to implement partnership with other authorities in order to allow operators to have access to our market easily and efficiently as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohamed. Any final words from you, Mathilda, on the role of regulators in financial literacy?
Sure. I think that all stakeholders have to play a big role in financial literacy in the countries, and regulators play a role in particular around creating a legitimacy around the industry, creating trust, and ensuring the sort of customer protection and fraudulent activities that may be going on around financial services and likely are in most markets are things that customers understand how to avoid. And I think the industry players themselves, it's in our interest that customers are very comfortable with these services. And so, a huge part of what BIMA does is educating individuals as we're speaking to them about what insurance is, and then digitally how to buy them and why you can trust us. Something that I think that Ghana did very well on mobile money originally was they created this concept of MOMO, which became a really well-known now phrase in Ghana that everyone calls mobile money MOMO. And actually, together with GIZ and the NIC and Allianz in Ghana, we've just tried to roll out a similar thing called MOBI, which is mobile insurance. And the concept that people should be familiar with, that this is a trusted and legitimized kind of way for you to buy insurance. And I think, we're too soon to see what the results are. And I think if we continue this, it could be, have a really good impact on the industry players and the regulator.
Thanks very much for that, Mathilda. So we are going to close in a second, and we just have one last request from the audience. We want to hear from you as well as to what you think are the most important recommendations for supervisors moving forward. So a link should be coming to you in the chat in a moment, which you can click on and vote. But in the meantime, we just have one last important question for you, Andrea, which is, the paper I presented is really interesting and clearly has stirred a lot of debates, but are there any opportunities or channels for non-regulators to comment on the paper, and how can that be done? So Andrea, over to you.
Sure. Actually, I will send through the chat an email where you can actually let us know if you're interested to participate in the consultation process. As I said, we're just starting this process hopefully at the beginning of next year. So if you're interested to participate, you're more than welcome. We really want to encourage the private sector to also provide comments. So please do so. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you very much for that, Andrea. So I think we've run over the time now. And so I would like to thank all the speakers again for taking the time to share your experiences here, everyone in the audience for also participating and all your really interesting questions. And of course, last but not least, to the GIZ and the Munich Re Foundation team and the Microinsurance Network team for putting this session together. So thanks everyone, and wishing you a good week and enjoyable sessions ahead.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you everyone for this wonderful session. 90 minutes have just gone so quickly, and there would have been so much more to discuss. So we all deserve a little break now, and I would like to welcome you back this afternoon at 2 p.m. where we will discuss lessons learned from developing national strategies. So we're taking from the regulatory level more to the governmental approach. And I hope to see all of you back at 2 p.m. So thank you to GIZ and A2I for organizing this. Thank you to all the panelists for taking your time, and take care and see you soon. Bye-bye.